Please welcome John Storyk.
Thank you. This just means I'm old. Great to be here. Let me introduce our panelists in the order that they're sitting. They don't actually really need too much introduction. Jimmy Douglas, you all know who he is. Elliot Scheiner, these are Grammy Award winners and Tech Award winners, and have contributed more than I can even list. I'm not even going to give you their credits. Larry is the founding editor of Tape Op. I think it's one of the best magazines in the industry right now. It's one of the few I read cover to cover. And Maxime is one of the two founding partners in Mix with the Masters. I think maybe the leading online educational organization, and the creators of Rue Boyer, Paris's newest studio, and we're going to take a look at that a little bit here and a little bit more in the second session. I just want to give you a picture of each one in their studios, okay? And just to give you a little sense of where they work, because we're going to talk about that, okay? There's Jimmy's studio, there's Elliot's home studio. These are the pictures they sent me. And Maxime's anything but a home studio. This is Rue Boyer, and I'm not sure if you have a home studio. You probably have something at home, but anyway, that's Rue Boyer in Paris. Very nice. Leave it to the French, right, to do a little editing on the portrait. Very cool, very cool photo. Okay, so just to get us in the mood, a little bit of eye candy, and then I'm going to pose some questions to the panelists. We're going to try to end with 10 minutes for questions. It's really a privilege to have 4 people of this kind of caliber available for questions. We can go a little bit over because I'm in charge of the next session, and there are no more sessions after that. So we're in a good space here. Just to make sure we all realize that recording is relatively new. Okay, so you can't have recording studios unless you have recording. So this is a relatively new event. Acoustics is not new. Let's just quickly remind ourselves of how new all this really is, because this is a typical studio in the 50s. Maybe some vintage gear that probably might interest a few people here, but this is a really grim environment. And it kind of responds to the way the industry existed then, okay, which engineers were on one side of the glass, artists came in, recorded, left. They had nothing to do with the process, and obviously that doesn't exist anymore. And my guess is these spaces probably didn't sound that good. They sounded as good as they needed to sound, okay? The music was great, but let's fast forward, okay, into the 60s, which was really the late 50s and 60s is kind of I think the birthplace of the modern studio, and it took artists. That's my position. It'll always be my position. Of course, if I have 4 technology company panelists up here, they're going to say it was the equipment, but I think it's the artists that always push the equipment guys. Anyway, it's a marriage of the two. You all know where this is, and you all know who those artists are. And now we have hundreds and thousands of these kinds of studios that are architecturally interesting, acoustically very accurate, extraordinary equipment, et cetera, et cetera. And we enter this age, 70s, 80s, and 90s, of almost excessive large studios, okay? And we're just gonna flash a few up here. I'm not even gonna name them. I just grabbed a few just to get us in the mood. Most of these are larger studios, okay? Architecturally really interesting, acoustically quite accurate. That's one that Jimmy knows. It was Timberland's studio that Jimmy was involved in, okay? But this is also a recording studio, okay? So we're gonna talk about that. How do we go from that environment to that environment? We're gonna talk a little bit more about that in part 2, okay? There's a log cabin studio in an attic in Boston, okay? Okay, so this is one of my favorite articles. It's almost 30 years old. It was written by Chris Stone, who co-founded the record plant. A lot of you knew him and or certainly know who he was. He was a mentor of mine, helped get me into business. And it's one of the great articles, and it was almost over 30 years ago, Chris recognized that we would enter an era of what he called motherships and satellites. It was published by Mix Magazine, and who was the editor of Mix Magazine at that time? Our very own David Schwartz. Thank you for bringing us that magazine all these years. And Chris couldn't have been more on the money. We are now clearly in that era of very few mothership studios that provide, both size and technologically speaking, services, architecture, environment, and technology that are unique, that are expensive, hard to get, but we're now surrounded by thousands and thousands of satellite studios, which of course used to be called home studios or project studios or personal studios, et cetera, et cetera. But they all share one, or they should share one thing in common. They all have to have some kind of vibe, because we're clearly in an era now where we have the technology to get any room sounding quite good, okay? Maybe not everybody is aware or knows how to do that, but we have that kind of technology, and we want to talk a little bit more about that in part two. But if anybody's not read this article, you should. You go to Mix Magazine, I think it's March '94, it's easy to find. It's a fantastic prediction, and little did Chris know that he was completely on the money. So we're in this kind of era of studios that may not look like studios that are living rooms. Okay, this is a recording studio. This is one of my favorite studios. I love this studio. The inside of an Airstream. Two very large mothership immersive environments. Okay. Again, more immersive environments. And who knows where we're going to land, which is what I'd like to get my panelists to begin to discuss. At last year's NAMM show, I walked around and just snapped these photos, and it occurred to me that these are studios that were put up in 2 hours, right in the middle of a convention hall. And who knows, maybe studios are going to end up looking like this, or even like this. I have no idea where this is going to go. I like this quote from Esperanza, a Berkeley graduate where I teach, and I'm not going to read it to you. You can read it, but she's spot on the money. Okay, studios are an instrument. So, like all great instruments, they've got to work, but they're only as good as the vibe and the spirit that the users put into it. Okay. At the end of the day, they need to be as good as our delivery system. So that studio from the 50s needed to be no better than the delivery system, okay, which was sort of scratchy vinyl, well, first rolls, then scratchy vinyls, et cetera, et cetera. But we're in a very strange era, because looks like 90% of the world listens to music this way, but some people may be listening to music this way. This is the sphere that just opened up, okay? So in between those two dumbbell universes, okay, we need studios that have to make content that work across the entire spectrum, okay, of this. And that, in there lies the problem. In there lies the need for transferability, okay? That plus the fact that more and more records are made in more than one environment. And in fact, I think some of our panelists are going to talk about it, or even have made careers of taking music that starts in one environment, moves to another environment, and then finally ends up in their environment to get it to work, and then it has to be mastered. Okay? How important is it that we trust the reliability and the exactness and accuracy of all these environments? Okay? Very important. So I end the sort of little preamble here with a story that Tom Dowd, one of the great engineers, and I believe Jimmy's your mentor, I guess, and I was lucky enough to have him as a client. He and Mac were planning a studio in Los Angeles. Mac owned Criteria. And I wanted to make sure, we were designing it, I wanted to make sure that one of the rooms worked perfectly for him. So I pulled him aside one day, and this is Tom Dowd. This is the Everest of engineers. And I said, so Tom, which is your favorite room at Criteria? And I'm looking for an answer, because then I'm going to replicate it or measure it or duplicate it. And he looked at me and says, I don't really have a favorite room. Whichever one they put me in, that's the room I work in. And I sort of watched my career just stop, right on the spot. I swear to God, this is a true story. I said, seriously? He says, yeah, I don't know, I'm comfortable in all of them, whichever one is free. I said, but they all sound a little different. He says, yeah, I know, that's a little bit of a problem. I spend about an hour, I put on the tape that I was working on last night, and I adjust my ears, and then I sort of move on. And that shook me up. I mean, it was one of those moments where I said, this doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense, but it made sense for Tom. Tom had, was extraordinary. But I think we are in an era where we can and we do want to make sure that there's a certain uniformity and a certain agreement, particularly in our mixing environments, as to how our rooms sound and should sound, okay? Not pertaining to the live rooms, not pertaining to tracking rooms. As a matter of fact, I think that the tracking rooms should be different. I think they should have signatures. And the plug-in people have gone through great extremes to make sure that they sell you stuff to make sure you exacerbate those differences and even to have those differences exploited, but not so in the mixing environments. Anyway, let me end by showing you a few shots of Rue Boyer. Rue Boyer was a studio we had the honor of working on with Max and his partner Victor. It's Paris's newest studio, clearly state-of-the-art. Literally the first day, who walks in to use it? Forget about testing it. Me, I would have put some band in there, at least to try to work out the kinks. So who goes in on day one? No, Jack Antonoff. I said, Jesus, that's a little stiff. And as it turned out, Jack now works all the time there when he's in Paris, and luckily we'd done 2 rooms for him. I just want to show it to you. This is Control Room A. It's all about vibe. In fact, so much about vibe, it drove me crazy a little bit from time to time, but they had a very, very specific image, sort of old school, new school, high tech, low tech, a look backwards, okay, with some vernacular, but a look forward, okay, but very, very state-of-the-art. So behind almost every one of these surfaces is a very specific acoustic treatment that was worked out rigorously, okay, using some software that we're going to talk about in the next session for some of you that want to dive into that, okay? And here are some more shots. There is Jack on day one. A studio like this, you would have gotten a local band to break it in. Nope, that's not the way it worked out, okay? But this is the same control room. Wait a second. That's the control room? That control, what happened to the console? Not my idea. I'd like to take credit for it, but it's not my idea. We did have a lot to do with making it work. So the console goes down, a floor goes over it, and there it is going up. The why did Max and Victor want to do it? That's where I'm going to stop, and that's, I think, a good place for you to start. But what we were able to do was take advantage of the volume below the console. The volume below the console is one of the best spots for low-frequency treatment that we never really get a chance to use because there's a console there. Okay, sometimes we can take advantage of some space in front of the console. We've done that a few times, but never do we have a big hole below the console where we can introduce a resonator and target it at a certain frequency, which we were able to do. So it was kind of a interesting effect. And in fact, it's done so that we can end up with this room. So I'm going to use that as a way of putting Max on the spot first. So why would you want to do this?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, it was totally a real estate constraint. It was not like to look fancy or anything. It was just like we have that amount of space, and our experience was that we wanted to have a huge control room, but at the same time, if we were designing a huge control room, as you can see in the floor plan to the bottom left corner, we would have small recording spaces, and therefore the idea that came up was like, well, it's kind of a shame to have only small recording spaces. So what if we want to record, like track a real band? And in that case, what if we could just like have the console disappear, roll the racks into Studio B, which you can see on the floor plan there. And what if we could use Studio B as the control room for Studio A, which now is a very nice live room and has 3 booths in front, which is a very nice setup for a band. And that's where the idea originated from, I guess. And I mean, it was not easy to do, but it makes sense. I mean, Paris real estate is incredibly expensive, so the versatility of the space was definitely worth it, basically.
Well, certainly anything's possible, okay? And what seemed what seemed difficult to do turned out to actually end up being an acoustic asset, okay, which was this big volume. So I'd like to start off with a question. Each person maybe could take a shot at answering it. And maybe I'll start off with you, Elliot, because I know you do a lot of remixing, okay? People send you things. How do you deal with this issue of transferability? Material coming to you wasn't recorded in your room, which I'm assuming you know and you're intimate with. How do you deal with this? And then how do you prepare for it moving on to a mastering environment? What about this issue of so much content being made in multiple environments and going through this process and sort of having to end up, you know, as perfect? How do you deal with this in your day-to-day work?
If it's not perfect, you don't. I mean, I got.
That's the end of it. That's it. We can all.
I got tracks from Europe, from Germany, and I'd never come across music that had 184 tracks.
Oof.
You know, it was just mindless to me, just trying to put it all together. But a lot of times I get stuff, I don't really mix it. You know, I just put it aside and don't do anything and say I can't do it.
What are the criteria for you drawing the line?
If I know I can't do it. Yeah, you know, it's tough sometimes. But most of the stuff I do get in is pretty good. You know, I can adjust, like Tom did, you can adjust your ears to not only your room, but the music that's coming in.
So, how do when material leaves your environment, I guess, how accurate is your environment? How does it work? And how do mastering engineers deal with your material? How's that working?
Most of the time, I feel that when I turn in music to mastering, I'll state what I want. Like, I did an album a couple of months ago with Madeleine Perot, and I felt that it sounded really good.
Your studio?
In my studio, and where we recorded it, it sounded great. And I got it finally mixed, and the mastering engineer added something, a little bit of top end. And when I got back, I said, did you add top end to this? And she said, yeah, I added a dB at like 10. And I said, what I sent you was, and I don't ever say that, but I said, what I sent you is what I want. I want it to come back to me the same way. And she took top end off, and it sounded great.
And so your experience is it leaves your place and you're happy?
If I did it, if I recorded it, if it was involved with me throughout the project. If it wasn't, it's anybody's guess.
What percentage of your work, well, and maybe you don't have to starts off in another studio, like you're the engineer, but you're not working in your studio, and then you bring it to your studio. What's that like in your life? Is that a small amount? Is that the majority? I mean, you don't have a live room in your studio, right?
No, I don't. I mean, I can do some stuff there, but vocals, about it. But if I'm doing it and I'm recording the tracks, I'm working at the studio now, I love. And it's, when I walked into this place for the first time, it was like the 70s.
Right.
It was just amazing. It had Neve 8058 and just sounded so great. It was, everything worked on the console. It was like putting up a mic and not EQing anything. You could just put up the mic and move it and get what you want out of it. And something like that, I know it's going to be great in the end. When I get music from other people that are doing stuff, and sometimes in their bedroom, and there's a lot of that. Sometimes it sounds amazing. Sometimes what is this?
Yeah.
I did a band, Stephen Wilson. What's the name of that band?
Porcupine Tree.
Porcupine Tree. He wanted to mix an album that he did in 5-1, and he came to my house, and we did it, and everything sounded great. And he did almost everything in his bedroom, except drums. He did drums at the power station.
So Jimmy, I know, because you've told me, you have a lot of projects where they send you stuff and they want you to make it better. You've told me this, make it better. How's that? How's that working?
Well,
And what does that mean, better?
I don't usually listen to that term because that's a subjective term. What is better?
Well, that's my question.
Well, yeah, I don't know what better is. I know I get what I get, and I can hopefully make it sound better. But you're mentioning stuff coming from here and coming from there. It kind of doesn't even matter anymore where it comes from. It has nothing to do with putting it together and making it cohesive and presentable to someone else to listen to, and that's kind of what the craft has come down to. And honestly, of all the records I made back in the day when I was doing acoustic stuff and I was the engineer as well as the mixing, and
The whole chain was yours.
the whole chain was mine, and it was like acoustic. There were people playing, and and it's lots of harmonics and shit's flying everywhere, and then we were also cutting on disc, so there was other parameters that, like for instance, you'd have like a really mighty, nice looking sounding bass thing, and and you go to put a disc and it would skip.
You can't get it. Yeah.
Right. So I'm saying, so we had other things that made it, you had to go back and change because of the limitations of the technology. Once we're in digital, when it sounds like it sounds, there's no restrictions. It's a lot easier, and in terms of mastering.
Are you the last stop before mastering on most of your projects?
Most of the projects, and in that whole period of time I was working with Tim, I was the guy starting it and finishing it. We had very few live musicians. That's why I said that, because everything was kind of, samples and loops and things like that. Very few real musicians, and it didn't make the difference to the audience. They didn't care. They don't know where it came from. But the point of that story was when we would master most of those records, I came from the day when you go to a mastering house and you'd sit there and you'd listen with the mastering engineer as if he was the mixer to your record now. And 90% of the time, I'd say, like Elliot said, that I'd be sitting there just talking, whatever, and they'd be doing the work, and I wouldn't say anything to them. I wouldn't tell them what to do. I think that's the worst thing you can do to an engineer or whatever, is tell them, because, when people tell me things, I fuck it up every time, because it's like I didn't get the chance to hear it, I didn't get a chance to see it and feel it the way to do what Jimmy does. When you tell me what it's got to be, I usually miss But anyway, the point of that the mastering thing was I didn't tell them what I wanted. They would master it. It would always sound great. And I go, so what'd you do? And they go, I didn't do anything. So I learned that, well, I've been doing it for a while, especially the Atlantic days. So I learned that, like, when I'm finished with the mix, I did the mix I'm doing, that's what it should sound like. And by the way, the other day I had Gene Paul, a friend of ours, Gene Paul, who we both know. He does mastering now.
Les Paul's son.
Les Paul's son. And I sent him something, and he thought, it's very funny actually, taught me a lot. He thought I wanted him to go ham into the old Atlantic days, but it was a gospel thing, I did it, and I really was just like, I had it. He did it, and when I said, you know what to do, Gene, and he sent it back, and I was in a hurry, and I listened. I couldn't be on big speakers. I was on my computer speaker suddenly, and it was like, what the hell is this? And then I thought, oh shit, you listen in computer speakers. You didn't judge it on the speakers on the computer, which is how a lot of people are gonna actually perceive this piece of product. I was like, oh yeah, new world. You can't just do one thing. You gotta check it on the earbuds. You gotta check it on the computers, because they all sound very different. However, I said, Gene, blah, 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 blah. And he goes, well, I went and I put all this stuff on it. And I was like, no, I just want it the way it was.
Do you check everything on buds before it leaves?
I should say yes, but no.
Elliot, do you?
Let's see.
You check on buds before work leaves your studio?
Headphones.
Headphones.
Yeah.
No headphones and no cars for me, by the way.
Larry, you get the same question, my friend.
Headphones a lot, yeah. And then, I have like 3 sets of monitors and a sub.
3 sets.
So I'll just, go back and forth. And I've had the same thing where people tried to like analog up my mix, and it was a mix I did through a Rupert Neve Designs console with Burl converters, and it was fuzzy and warm, if that's what you want to call it. And I was like, what are you doing? It was all messed up, the mastering, and then I had to just keep undoing getting him to undo his mastering, which was crazy,
You check on phones before things leave?
I think it's a good thing. I mean, I don't mean to be playing devil's advocate, but in terms of transferability, John, but in and of itself, it's never been as uniform. If you see it the other way, like everybody has the same earbuds almost, the Apple ones. I mean, I don't know the exact data, but I think is it like 80% that the music is consumed on Spotify?
Yeah.
On something like that, right?
I think it could even be higher.
In of itself, that means that you take the acoustic out.
Will, what do you think? We got a former Spotify engineer here. 80% on Spotify?
Something like that, right?
I think headphones a lot. I'm kind of with Jimmy. I do headphones that don't do the buds, but I think so much of it's consumed on earbuds that it is something.
Did you check your Spotify mixes on buds and phones?
A little bit, yeah. I'm definitely headphones, but I don't even own earbuds. So.
I mean, don't you think the real answer is like, if it sounds like a record, it's a record. If it doesn't sound like a record, you made a mistake.
I'm just asking the question. I got the easy job here.
But also it's knowing your audience. It's
These answers are putting me out of business here. No, I'm only, not really. Not really.
Better not.
I think, well, the answers are the answers.
What is a record, by the way? What's a record?
But you don't start on buds.
We still call them records.
But
Nobody's
none
listening to
of you
records
are
anymore.
starting your work on buds. None of you are doing. You're in rooms that are at least self-calibrated or even calibrated. You trust your rooms, and your mixes are only as good as what you're hearing.
John,
you may test it on phones. You
but
may
the
test
key
it
word,
on
John, the key word you're using is the word trust.
trust.
And I'm only saying that because I ended up with a piece of equipment that came back with a different transformer, and for the last weeks or two, I can't trust what I'm doing. And I swear, and I'm learning. I'm going, wow, the confidence about mixing and knowing what you have and your equipment is 90% of the game, because then you're not second guessing everything you do. And I've been going through it actually.
Let me switch gears. Not so much for Max. You have a studio where you're working that is a commercial studio. okay? Everyone else is working in what I would call a home studio, a home environment. Do your clients come to your studio a lot? Are they comfortable in your studio? Do you want them to come to your studio?
I've had a couple.
Right.
I worked with Fish.
With Fish,
and,
yeah.
And Trey wanted to
come
come
up?
up. Yeah. And Madeline came up, but generally Stephen came up because he didn't know what 5-1 was, so he was trying to learn what to do, and he's done pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But generally, no, I don't like having anybody there.
Okay. Going out of business fast here, okay. Jimmy, how about you? People come and your clients come to you?
Not as, there are fewer of those clients lately that want to spend the time to come and hang out in the studio because everything is just done on the internet. Everybody's sending you files, you know. By the way, there was one thing I did do in the 90s that was interesting. I started doing jingles and posting a lot. And one of the things that changed my head from tape and knowing it to be music was they'd come with a bag full of a shopping bag and they'd have the elements. And they go, "We brought the elements." And I'm like, what the hell is an element? And that's all we do now. People are sending files. It has nothing to do with
elements, yeah.
They're elements. It has nothing to do with music. It's really important to understand they're just files now. There's no personality attached to them. Half of them aren't real. It's just, and I'm not, by the way, I'm not putting this down. I'm saying this is a reality that we live in. And so I don't see it the same. I don't look at a part from a guy and take it personally and go, oh, this guy played this guitar part and I'm going to do all this. It's just a file to be put together, mixed up, mashed up, and presented to the community so they can enjoy what your vision was.
All right, I want to switch gears again, and we also want to be mindful of the time because I want to leave a little bit of space for some questions. So you're ready for the question. It's the 500-pound gorilla, immersive. I won't even say Atmos, I'm just going to say immersive because we do know there are more systems out there than just Atmos, and more coming, I believe, from what I just read. 2 more coming any day now. I can hardly wait, at least from what I saw. How much of that are you doing? What do you think about it? Is it here to stay? Anything you want to? Let's jump into this conversation. I can start that. My team, we're doing about 20 or 30 studios a year. Most of them are. Well, last year we did some commercial ones for record. Okay, where is that kid? No, that's okay. You can stay here. I like him. He's a future client. I like kids. I got grandkids. I love kids. But most of them are private studios, vanity studios, people that have now, musicians kind of left it, made a lot of money, now they're coming back, destination studios. Many of them are all-in-one studios. By that I mean it's one big room where they can play and record. I think that's actually a trend. Maybe that's the subject of another conversation. Mike is doing that for Fish, and a lot of people are doing that. But the immersive, there's rarely any of them that we don't at least wire for immersive, and we're not by that conduit and pipe, which of course is the hardest, particularly in the ceiling. It's very hard to come back and do it. Okay, and then you can always just attach speakers, et cetera, et cetera. So how much of that are you doing? And if you don't want to answer that, do you believe in it? Do you believe it's here to stick? It's not the first time our industry has seen a delivery format come and go. You've lived through, we don't have to get through that saga. This one has definitely arrived, and it doesn't seem to be leaving. It doesn't seem to be leaving. You got some really big 500-pound gorillas behind it with a lot of dough, But that's also happened in the past, you know, Spielberg backed one, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you think? I want the editor to start. Yeah, because you're interviewing people, and you should have more information than anybody.
I mean, as a studio owner.
Well, as you can be, as a studio owner, or as a magazine editor.
I'll answer as a studio owner and a magazine editor. We've gotten zero requests to do anything in immersive and one of the larger studios in Portland, Oregon, and we've gotten zero, not one request.
Portland, the immersive capital of America.
But let me also mention we've never been like more of a production or full service facility. We've mostly done live, instrument-based music. We're known for a lot of indie rock and things like that. So really the requests are really to come and track and to build these records.
But as someone who's interviewing a lot of people.
Who's interviewed a lot of people, I think immersive is fascinating. I went to a place in Bellevue, Washington recently and was able to hear some new systems that aren't in public yet, where the tangibility of the placement in the room was just freaky. Like the drum kit was over here, the upright bass was over there. Like, when you hear that and you're like, oh, it's not just some crappy like home surround system or you're not at the movies, And I thought that was amazing. I don't know what it means to places that are built as, music production facilities, because we need, like in my case, I would need some people to say, we really want you to do this, and I would have to invest in changing some of the technology. Yeah. But zero request up until now is interesting to me.
Elliot, I know you've mixed some of the best surround and immersive work. What do you think? Can you do it in your home studio? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I can.
You can?
But it took me a long time to find out how to do it. So I didn't go for Atmos. I went to Oro 3D.
Oro, yeah.
And
that big project that I flashed up, that's Oro.
Yeah, the configuration's different, and you can actually record 96, which you can't do with Atmos. You have to do 48. It's a film format, and they're going to keep it at film format. They're never going to go to 96. You can archive in 96, but nobody will ever hear it.
But then if your product has to be Dolby or Atmos compatible, how's that done? You have to go to another house.
Mastering.
Mastering. Okay, mastering does it. Okay. So you do work now in surround and immersive.
In Oro.
In Oro.
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult to say what happened here, but
No, it's not.
Dolby is, got a bunch of the labels to get together, and they told them, you have a new stereo here.
Yeah.
You can sell your entire format in stereo again. And that's all they cared about, because nobody is going to hear immersive. Nobody right now. No, all they're concentrating is reselling the stereo binaurals.
Binaurals, right. Jimmy, did you convert your place to?
Yeah, no, I've converted it, and I've been doing it. I think I do it pretty good. I think I understand it really well.
Was it hard to convert, or just wires and trusses?
Well, I did it very simply. I just used the output of like a 192, and I just took the output and put it to the speakers, and then I controlled it all from inside the box. And
physically, you just sort of...
Physically, I said, oh, here's an output, go to one speaker. Here's an output, go to another speaker. And I did it I won't say the inexpensive way.
So it's like a 514 system?
No, it's a 916.
916, okay.
Yeah. But I did it the inexpensive way. I didn't have some people come and build the proper build-outs. The thing is, I've also been doing surround for a lot of years, so my ears are used to doing that. It wasn't like I was learning a whole new thing. It was like an expansion of, I have more speakers. I can use the heights. Great. I've been doing a lot of surround for many years. So in that respect, that wasn't new. Having the extra stuff was new, what to do with it and so forth and so on. But Yeah, I love it. And the other thing that why I think this time it's different.
Yeah, I think it's different too.
Well, because before when we had it, when there was the 5.1 surround, all this other stuff, it required the listener to go buy equipment. And a listener wasn't really willing to do it, and the record company really was putting everybody out. Suddenly, guess what, everybody? These guys, this is an Apple phone, by the way, Apple. These guys decided they would champion the call with Dolby, and you can hear it through here. You don't have to buy anything.
Yeah.
No, I mean that, and I'm like, that's the difference. It's going to make a difference because everybody owns it anyway. It's just a matter of how they decide to, to consume it, and that's kind of why I believe it might stay. About the 96 thing, by the way, you realize that's twice, the files are twice as big, huh? So my 5K mixes, it takes like most of my mixes end up being about 5 gigabytes in Atmos.
Per song?
Yeah, per song.
Per track?
Per track. Well, I give or take, but that's the basic number. You're looking at 5 gigabytes. So an album of a lot of songs is probably about 70 gigabytes. Okay. You realize at 96K, that's going to be 100 and whatever the heck it is. Anyway, and these guys are listening to MP3s.
Well, okay. And before we, and I know Rue Boyer has only been open about a year. What's going on there?
Well, we are Atmos ready, and I would say that from what I've observed from other mixers, interviewing a lot of mixers through Mix with Masters, I'd say that most serious record mixers have delivered the Atmos version as well.
Right.
And the reason behind it is because if you want to have any control on what's going to happen, it's very risky to deliver stamps to the label and have somebody do it for no budget because the label
or a
care.
machine does it.
Yeah, or a machine.
Yeah, even worse. Yeah.
And basically, if I'm not mistaken, maybe I'm mistaken, but I don't think I am. That's the first thing, the Atmos version, provided that you have some AirPods 2 or something, or Pro or whatever. That's the first mix that's going to be played off by default. It's going to be the Atmos version, not the stereo version.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's right. I
think you're right.
So like all the big guys, like
if you don't do it, they're going to do it for you.
Right.
And they may not, and they're probably not going to do a good job.
Very, very likely, yeah. So I'd say that it's just like you have to do it. It's not even like a question.
Larry, Portland is a big opportunity for you in Portland.
I know. Well, one of the things you mentioned the Sphere in Vegas earlier, and one of the things that's working in that place is where they're able to project a listening experience and have it appear at a certain. They're able to project a listening experience and have it appear in a certain spot in the room. Where we're so used to the idea of the speaker being here, and we walk between the speaker, we hear the speaker. And this is like
this is a whole new ball game. The holoplot. That's a new.
Yeah. So
How many
the future.
people have been to the Sphere here?
Don't you believe that
Was anybody who's been there disappointed? I heard it's fantastic, right? I heard a holoplot demo years ago at EarCom. This is going to take a while to.
Right.
Well, first of all, this is a technology that you do need the environment for. I mean, it doesn't mean anything in earbuds. The whole idea is that it takes place in a room, but it'll scale down. Right. It's already scaled down at the Beacon in New York, and it has a lot of, the implications of it are pretty serious. It's also very expensive.
My theory is that home stereo is just going to end up like a little bunch of little pods around your house that follow where you are. Like you could be in washing dishes, and you can have surround sound around your head, and you got your own little audio.
Right now, those guys are not particularly interested in figuring out how to get it into the home. They want to build a few more of those.
Right, but it's going to
$1 billion spheres. But yeah,
I mean.
Okay, so we have just a few more minutes. I think is anybody? I don't want to keep going. Anybody have any questions or fire away? Julie, you got to have one. So just jump up on a mic, I think, because it's getting recorded. Thanks. Come on. Yeah.
Hey, gents. Tape Op made me believe that I could do it. Mix with the Masters. Showed me that it's possible. So thank you guys for doing that. So my name is Mike. I own Black and Gold Studio here in Whittier, California. I have 2 rooms, plug and play and record model that was mentioned. Now, you guys have spoken about all the ways that you're receiving these files, right? They're from a bedroom or they might be from a flagship studio. My question is, as a studio owner, what can I be doing to not only improve the studios that I have, but as I build and make more, to set up my clientele to give you the best? So do I invest in a lot of great microphones and just let them record in Focusrite preamps? Nothing wrong with that. Is it great preamps with a bunch of 57s? Which direction do you think that I should be going? Is it with microphones, is it preamps, or is it just sound treatment and environment?
We didn't touch on this. I thought we were going to do more of that. But the traditional, for me, and I've been in them since I'm a kid, so the traditional studios, I know it, with the younger people that are coming up, they really don't cater too much to all the audio stuff, the attention to the quality. They like the lighting, and they like the feeling, and they like the flow, and even the acoustic treatment sometimes, they really kind of, unfortunately, I'm not saying it's a good, I'm just saying, I have 3 rooms, and I gave up 2 rooms to people, and all they do is the lights, or it's like, it's more, the recording is more of a state of mind.
Yeah.
4 or 5 people come in with a laptop and some Fruity Loops, and they sit and they just chill.
Yeah.
And they make music, and they're happy doing it. And I can tell you, there's a lot of things in those rooms that I'm like, dudes, I can fix this. They don't care. So I'm not saying that's what you do, but understand that, like, and even Portland, by the way, part of Portland and even hip hop isn't doing Atmos yet because the information isn't that complex. I mean, and it's not, their listenership aren't really ready to do all that yet. They're still listening to the message. But as a studio owner, I wonder the same thing, because I go in some of these studios and I look and I go, really? And everybody's good with it.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
I think the thing that is, when I get things sent to mix, I just wish there was a producer. You know, I wish that the tracks all came together and made sense instead of like 184 tracks, or, you know, to me that's like the idea that everything kind of, if I could push the faders up a bit and it starts to come together right away, I'm like, okay, we can do this, right?
What are faders?
Well, you know, virtual faders, Jimmy.
Just being silly.
Let's shoot.
Hi guys, I just want to thank you for your time. You guys mentioned that you guys get a lot of work online. So I was wondering, is a lot of that coming from your past clients, or is a lot of that unsolicited? And how do you compete in the world of the internet? You know, there's a lot of free stuff. Oh, come send it, we'll master it for free, or, you know, some Grammy-winning guys doing it for a very low price. Like, how do you set that standard and get the work that you want?
I was meaning they're just using it to send stuff. What you're talking about is just commercially competing with everybody else on the internet. If I understand you right, it's like, it sounds like you're saying, like, you know, hey, free mastering, Jimmy will do this for you. No, I was just saying, instead of them having a FedEx and sending me tapes, they just send them online.
They're just using online, the stuff arrives online. Most of it arrives online?
Yeah. But what you're talking about is the future, by the way. It's becoming that, because people are starting to do work online, and they're finding clients online, and they're finding customers online, and that's a whole nother, that's something that you can figure out probably for us.
I mean, I was on Sound Better for quite a while and getting jobs like that, and I get a lot of work sent to me from all over the world for mixing, and it's really just people looking at record credits going, you know, and seeing, oh, look, he did this, he might be okay. And that's really more so than any kind of promotion or anything. Right. And number one, our back catalogs are certainly always, you know, premium.
You got a little? Yeah.
I have a quick question
We
about...
got 2 or 3 more. We can go a little over because I'm the next session, so it doesn't matter.
Is there a floor that is better for a studio to be on? I have 3 options: basement, ground, or second floor. And then windows. Does it matter? I have no windows in my studio.
What's your question?
For sound, is it better to have a basement studio or a second floor, or does it matter?
I gotta take this one. That's like saying, what's a car cost? That's a tricky question. If all things are equal, so that means all things, you can get the air conditioning equally to each of these 3 things. The natural light is equal, the egress is equal, the electricity is equal. et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, I don't think that ever really happens, but let's just assume that they are, okay? You want to be on a ground floor. You're going to get the best bass response if you're slab on grade. Also, slab on grade is going to give you a few more isolation options. You can split cut the slab, et cetera, et cetera. But I assure you that all those variables are never going to be equal. Okay, yeah, I'm slab on grade, but I got the most height on the second floor. I got a lot of height on the first floor, but I got skylight capability on the third floor. And I could just go on forever and ever. And because of that, I do have job security. Okay, so I'm not sure if I can really answer your question, but I'm happy to dive in, and if you're around tomorrow, and with a little more information, we could probably at least we could eliminate a few choices. Yeah.
And windows. Are windows a bad thing in a studio?
No, windows are not. Glass can and should be your friend. Natural daylight, I think, is really, lots of people like it. We went through great pains to get natural daylight in one of the rooms.
I was going to say
completely
earlier,
changed that room.
I was going to say earlier, like as a commercial owner, a studio owner, like the only thing that people care is how it sounds, if it can play loud, if there's daylight. That's one of
is there daylight?
That is one of the biggest criteria that comes back. Like Pharrell, like all those people, and like they don't care about the equipment at all. Like sorry to demystify. I know we are at NAMM.
No, they just assume the equipment will work.
Yeah, as long as you have like something okay, like one vocal chain. Yeah, daylight, great acoustics.
No, daylight and glass is not. Absolutely. Not only does it not have to be your enemy, it can actually be your friend. You can use it as a resonator, as a membrane resonator, if you know what you're doing. You can angle it and use it as a reflector, so it's not your enemy at all. We've got, they're going to kick us. Well, they're not going to kick us out because we're here. Yeah.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you guys for your time and your contributions. The records that you guys have created inspired me to be a musician in the first place.
I got a lot of records from these guys.
My question is about deliverability. Like you were saying, Jimmy, that people listen in MP3s and, a lot of the music is being streamed. So how can you, when we have this immersive sound and it's just so perfect to get it to translate.
You are segueing into our next session.
10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag.
I would guess that the best you can do is it's got to sound good in your space, and you hope that it moves on. I don't see how you can do any more than that. I think it gets more complicated with immersive.
Well, with immersive, actually, when I first started doing this, I ended up having to mix twice.
Oh, okay.
Because it sounded one way here, and it sounded amazing. But when I would go in the phones, it didn't interpret the same. So I found I'd have to mix it again in the phones, and then go back and forth until they were kind of halfway to each of them. Like mainly the vocal would be the biggest disparity. Like, up there it was perfect, and all of a sudden it's like, nah, in the headphones, and I'm like, holy shit. And so I'd have to go back and forth until I kind of got the average of both of them.
And I'm assuming when a client wants an immersive mix, you're delivering two mixes, a stereo mix and
well, no, the stereo's done already.
Oh, it's done already, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Do you hear stuff in other people's studios?
Do I listen in other people's studios? Yeah, I do.
Thank you, guys.
Do you have a favorite mastering? You don't have to tell me which one. Are you in charge of when it leaves you where it goes? You are, right, Elliot, on your projects?
Yeah, I am.
You're not?
No.
Larry?
To a degree.
Okay.
I'm not. Yeah, not that often. Yeah.
But Elliot, you are, because you're usually on a project.
Most of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. It's a little easier if you know where it's going. Yeah, cool. One last question.
Hi, thank you guys so much for doing this, by the way. I guess my question is, as bedroom recordings start to become more popular, what would you say is the most overlooked thing, like acoustically speaking, about bedroom recordings?
Okay, well, that assumes that bedroom recording is becoming more popular. See, now this is what Donald is doing. You see? Who said bedroom recording is becoming more popular? I don't know. And by the way, that Billie Eilish, who's terrific, by the way, was not mixed in a bedroom, okay? But let's, and the next album wasn't even recorded in a bedroom, and they're geniuses, okay? But let's just assume for the moment that your sentence is true, and that bedroom recording, whatever that means, is becoming more popular.
Well,
What's the question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, to be fair, there is the Chicago Recording Company, which is where I'm from, Chicago. They closed down their music recording facilities, unfortunately. They just do film and post work.
Familiar with them.
So, yeah, it's, I guess it's,
A bedroom recording studio is a personal home project studio, happens to have a bed, and if you think of it that way, it's not really new.
Sure.
I mean, it's not like Billy was in the bed, I mean, it's not, it was just a small room, it had the bed. The way her brother lays the tracks on is not unique. Her music is very thin, that's why it's amazing. And personal project studio. We're ending right where I started. Motherships and satellites. It's just a small satellite. Okay? Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Thank you.